In this video, we are going to see how to create this Kanban board with the React. We can add columns, we can add tasks, move tasks between columns, delete tasks, edit column title, sort columns, and even edit tasks content. We are going to build this with React, Typescript, Tailwind CSS, and Dnd-Kit library. Let's start by setting up our environment. For this project, we will use Vite. Go ahead and open your terminal either in VS Code or in a separate window and run the following command npm create Vite. You will be asked to enter the project name. In my case, it will be D&D tutorial. Press enter and you will be prompted with some questions. Select React, then select TypeScript plus SWC. Press enter. Vite has created the project for us. And now I'm going to open the project folder that Vite has created inside VS Code. Perfect. Let's now add some libraries that we will use in this project. Open the terminal and type npm install @dnd-kit/core @dnd-kit/sortable. Press enter and wait for the installation process. Okay, now we are going to add Tailwind CSS, a CSS framework. Let's follow the tutorial on their website. So start by writing on the terminal npm install -D Tailwind CSS post CSS auto prefix. Press enter. Now let's type npx tailwind css init/p. And as you can see, this command has created two files for us. Now let's edit the tailwind.config.js file. And let's replace the content of our file with this new content. In this way, we are enabling Tailwind on JS6, TS6, TS, and JS files. Great. Let's now extend the theme with our custom colors. Okay, so inside the theme extend object, let's create a colors object. And inside, let's create a main background color property. And we are setting it to this color, and a column background color. Perfect. Now let's move ahead and open the file index.css and delete everything from it. Now let's go to the file app.css. Let's delete everything from here. And now we can add those three tiling directives to our app CSS. Perfect. Let's now add another library. So let's go back to our terminal and type npm install tailwind-merge. Perfect. Type npm run dev to start the development server. Everything is working, so we can start coding our project now. To begin with, let's apply some basic style to our project. So let's go to the file app.css, and for the tag HTML, body, and a root, I'm gonna apply a black background, a text white, and a box border. Now let's go to the app.tsx file. We can remove all the content that we have inside and add our content. So what we want to do is create a Kanban board component. So let's go in the Project Explorer and let's add in the source folder a components folder. Inside the components folder, we can create a Kanban board.tsx file. And I'm creating our component with a snippet for VS Code, just typing rfce. And as you can see, it's creating the component for me. Let's remove the import that we are not using. Let's use our Kanban board component here. And let's remove unused imports. Let's start by adding a button, add column. So let's go and style the button. 860 pixel, 350 pixel, mean width 350 pixel, cursor pointer, let's make it rounded, let's give him a background color. So we can use our main background color that we define in the setup step. Then let's give him a border and a border color, background column border. Let's give him some padding, a ring for the over part. Let's style now our main Kanban to center everything. So let's go here, class name, margin auto, flex, min age screen, full width, item center, overflow X auto, overflow Y hidden because we are just scrolling the columns horizontally. And let's give you a custom padding. Now we also need to center everything inside. So let's go here. We cannot just use justify center. If we add more elements on the screen, we will have a strange scroll behavior that cuts out our divs. So what we want to do instead is not use justify center, which stands for justify content center, but we are just giving to our wrapper a margin auto. And now, as you can see, it's centered. Now let's move back to our button. I want to add an icon to the button. So first thing first, let's go to source folder and create an icons folder. Inside the icons folder, let's create a plus icon.tsx. I'm using, as always, rfce. Now we can find our icons inside the Aero Icons website, just searching plus. So choose whatever you want. I will choose this, the plus cycle. So I'm copying the JS6 and I'm replacing my div with the copied JS6. Now let's remove the unused imports. Let's get back to our Kanban board and I can just use the plus icon component inside my button. Let's see if everything is working. Yes, so let's style it. Let's give a flex to the button and a gap. Now we are setting the on-click event. I'm creating a function, create column. Now, create new column, sorry. Now we need a place where to store our columns. Let's define our columns. Const columns, set columns, equal to use state, and for now is an empty array. Let's import the use state hook from React. Perfect. We are going to create a type for our column. So inside the source folder, let's create a types.ts file, and we are going to export type column, which consists of an ID and a title. We are also going to define this ID type. Export type ID, export type ID, which can be a string, in our case, or a number. So we can be just more flexible. Let's go back now to our Kanban board, and let's say that this columns array is of type column array. And let's import it from types. Perfect. So now let's go back to our create new column function. We will have a column to add of type column, and then we will update the columns to contain all the previous columns plus our column to add. So we have to set an ID property and a title property on the column. For the ID property, we are just going to create a generate ID function that generates for us a random ID, and the title will be just column plus a number which consists of the column's length plus 1. So let's go and define our function generate ID. And what we can do is to generate a random number between 0 and 10,000. So we are just returning math.floor of math.random times 10,001. Now, let's console log our columns. Now, let's see this. Perfect. Gonna zoom in a little bit. Now, when I add a column, as you can see, I have an ID and a column. Perfect. We want to show our columns, which will be our container. And for each column, we will return a div that contains the column title. Okay, perfect. Now let's go style this wrapper. What we just need is to put a flex box and a gap. And also here, what we want to do is to put a flex box and a gap. Perfect. Maybe let's add a little more gap. Perfect. Now, instead of returning this ugly div, let's go create in our components folder a column container.tsx. Let's remove the unused imports. And what we want to do is to add an interface props that defines the properties that are going to pass to the column container. Contains a column of type column. Perfect, so props of type props. Let's extract the column property from the props. And here we can use column.title. Let's go back to our Kanban board, and instead of this, let's return our column container. That gives us an error, as you can see, because it requires the property column. So column equal column. And now everything is working. Now let's jump in our column container and let's style it. Perfect, so let's style our column. Let's give it a BG column background, a width of 350 pixels, a height of 500 pixels, a max height of the same amount of pixels. Let's make it rounded. Let's make it a flex box and flex call. So our column container will contain a column title. I'm adding those comments so you can see better how we are splitting our column container, a column task container, and a column footer. So our task container needs to take all the available space. So let's create a div content, and let's give it a flex and a flex grow style. Now we are going to add our footer, and for now let's say footer. Now let's style our title. So let's wrap this inside a div. Let's put our title inside and let's give it some style. Main background color. Let's give it text medium, a fixed height. Let's give it a cursor grab, rounded, and let's remove the rounded borders from the bottom. Perfect. Let's add some padding and a font bold. And let's give a color to the border. And also a border width. Okay, as you can see, let's zoom in. Okay, perfect. Let's now add a chip that tells us how many items we have in the column. Let's go here. And before the title, we need another div that contains 0 for now, but we have to improve it later. And let's style this chip. So let's center. Justify center. Items center. Let's give him a background. Let's give it a padding. A text small. Perfect. And now we need to put the title and this div in a flexbox. So let's wrap it. And let's style this as a flex. And let's give it some gap. Perfect. Let's make it. And now let's make the background circular, so rounded full. The last thing that we want is a delete button here. So let's add a button. Delete for now. And we are going to put it here. Okay, so let's make this a flexbox also. Items, let's center everything. And justify between. First thing first, we are gonna replace the delete button with an icon. So let's go back to Hero Icons website. Let's search for a trash icon. Let's copy the JSX. Let's go back to our icons folder and let's create a trash icon.tsx. And I'm replacing the div with our copied JSX. Let's go back to our project and let's import the trash icon. Let's style the trash icon. So I'm giving it a stroke of gray 500, but it's not working because we have to go back to our trash icon and we have to remove the stroke current color line. Let's add a over stroke white. On over, let's add also a background color. Let's make it rounded. And let's give it some padding. Finally, we are going to call a delete column function inside the onClick handler. Delete column, and we are going to give it the column ID. So let's create the delete column function. First of all, we are going to receive it from the Kanban board as a property. The function takes an ID of type ID and returns nothing. Let's import the ID type from the types file and let's extract it from the props. Perfect. But now we have to add it because delete column is not a function. So we are going back to our Kanban board. As you can see, we have an error on our component that says that delete column is missing. So let's add it. And delete column. Now we are going to implement this function. So let's go and type function delete column takes an ID of type ID. What we are going to do is to filter all the columns, so columns.filter. We're going to pick all the columns which ID is not the given ID. And then we are going to set columns, filtered column. Sorry, let's add an S here and also an N here, we have a typo. Perfect. Let's see now if everything is working. Yeah, perfect. Okay, now let's go back to our Kanban board and let's add a key to the column container. Okay, everything's good. Now we are going to implement drag and drop functionality between columns. Let's start adding some drag and drop functionalities inside our Kanban board. In order to do that, we have to wrap our Kanban board with a Dnd context. So let's import Dnd context from Dnd Dnd-Kit/core. And let's wrap our application with DND context. Perfect. Now, in order to sort the columns, what we need is a sortable context exported from dnd-kit/sortable, and we need to wrap the column container array inside this sortable context. So let's do it. Perfect. The sortable context requires an items property, which consists in an array of columns ID. So let's define it. Columns ID equal to use memo from React, and we are returning columns.map call.id. And we are gonna recalculate this array every time that the columns array changes. The next step is to make the column container a draggable component. Let's go back to our column container component. We are going to use the useSortable hook, which you can import from Dnd-Kit sortable. So let's configure it. We need to give him an ID, let's say column.id. And we can add some data to it. So I'm just adding a type column and my column. And what we need from this hook is a setNodeRef function, attributes, listeners, transform, and transition. Now, we can create a custom style with the transform and transition property. So let's create it, const style equal transition. And then we need to import CSS from Dnd-Kit utilities. And we are going to use this utility object in our style object. So transform is equal to CSS.transform toString transform. Perfect. Now we are setting the reference of our column container with setNodeRef. So the Dnd-Kit library can handle our div. And also, let's add this custom style that the library is providing to us to our component. We have a typo here. Perfect. And now we need to add our attributes and listener to our column title, because I want to drag the column from this side of the container. So let's spread the attributes and let's spread the listeners. Now, as you can see, we can drag our column. But this is not the best way to do it, because it affects the original position and layout of the element. A better approach is to create a drag overlay, which is an element that is positioned on another layer of the DOM and is created on top of our dragged element. The first step is to intercept when a drag is happening. So let's go back to our Kanban board. On the DND context, we have our onDragStart listener, so we can use it with the onDragStart function that we are going to create. So let's create it, function onDragStart, that receives an event with a dragStart event type, and let's log it. Okay, let's try it now. Now, when I start dragging the column, as you can see, I receive an object with an active property that contains data, which is a reference, and which contains my column data and the type. And if you remember, we have filled the column property and the type property in the column container while using the useSortable hook. Now Using this onDragStart function, I can track that I'm actually dragging a column. So let's save it in a state, active column, set active column, use state, and the type of this use state will be a column or null in case we are not dragging anything. So let's go back to our onDragStart and if event.active.data.current.type equals column, then I can just say set active column to event.active.data.current.column. And I can return. Now, current can be null, so let's add this operator. Perfect. Now the next step is to create a portal on the document body with our column container while it's dragging. So let's go here before the close of the Dnd context tag. And let's add a drag overlay component, which is exported by the Dnd-Kit core. And inside this drag overlay component, if there is an active column, what I want to see is a column container that contains active column. And I also have to add the delete column function. Now let's see if it's working. Perfect. Now we are going to wrap the drag overlay with the create portal function. And we are saying that we want to put this element inside the document body. Let's import the create portal from React DOM. Let's try now. Perfect. Everything is working fine. The next step is to give a custom style to the column in the background while it's dragging. So let's go back to our column container. And let's extract from the hook another property called isDragging. And if isDragging, we are going to return a custom UI. So let's return for now a hello. Let's see if it's working. Yeah, okay. Now, what we can do is just replace this with a div, and let's duplicate ref and style. And also we can use the same class name for now. So let's see. And we have an empty column, nice. Let's give it also an opacity of, I don't know, 60. Let's give it a border and a border color. Let's test it now, perfect. We can also reduce the opacity if you want, 40%. Yeah, I like it. Now, as you can see, I'm zooming out so you can see all the columns. And now I can take the first column and drag it over the second column. This is happening because of the transition and the transform properties that we are getting from the use sortable hook. As you can see, when I release the drag, the column returns to its original position. We need to persist the new position in columns array. Let's go and do it. So let's go back to our Kanban Board.tsx. Let's go and use another listener called onDragEnd. So let's define an onDragEnd function. Function onDragEnd event. Drag and event. Now, this event, as you can see, contains an active element, an over element that can be also null, collisions, etc. We will focus on the active and over element. So let's go and extract those. Active over. If we don't have an over element, we are just returning, because it means we are not dragging over a valid element. Now I'm getting the active column ID, which is active.id, and const over column id over dot id. If those id are equal, I'm just returning. If they are not, I'm swapping the elements in the columns array. So set columns, I'm getting the actual columns array. And what I need is the index of the first of the active column. So const active column index, columns dot find index, where the call id is equal to active column id. Then I have to do the same thing for the over column. So over column index equal to columns find index call.id equals to over column id. Then I will use a helper function exported by Dnd-Kit, which is an array move function. So I'm returning the new columns array, which is the array move of columns, active column index, and over column index. So basically what this array move is doing is just swapping the active column index with the over column index inside the columns array, and it is returning the new array. Now let's see if it's working. Perfect. So everything seems to work, but there is one problem. If we click the delete button, this button is not working anymore, because now this button is part of the drag handler. Our problem is that we haven't defined a way to distinguish normal clicks from drag clicks. To solve this, we need to define an activator for the drag event. In our Kanban board, we are going to use a new hook called use sensors. So use sensors, and we can import it from React Dnd core. Inside the use sensors, we are going to use another hook called use sensor, and the sensor that we use is a pointer sensor. You can also use touch sensors, etc. Let's define a configuration for this pointer sensor. And as you can see, there is an activation constraint inside, which is an object that contains delay and distance and tolerance. We are using the distance property, and we are putting, for example, 300, which stands for 300 pixels. Now let's go add our sensors to the DND context. So sensors equal sensors. And now the delete button is working again. If we try to drag the column, we need to move it for 300 pixels, and then the drag event starts. So what we are gonna do, we are lowering the distance to 3 pixels. And I think it will work. Yes, perfect. Now we want to make it possible to edit the title of each column. So let's go back to our column container file .tsx. Okay, let's start by adding a const edit mode set edit mode use state false. So we can save in our component that we are editing. And then what we want to do is to set edit mode to true when we are clicking on our column header. So let's go there and on click, set edit mode to true. And then we are going to display an input field when the edit mode is true. So if it's not in edit mode, we will show our column.title. And let's remove it. In edit mode, we will show something else. For example, an input field. Now, when we click this, as you can see, we have an input field. So let's give it an autofocus, And thanks to autofocus, we will have the blur no matter what, because eventually we will lose the focus on the component. So on blur, set edit mode false. Let's try. Perfect. And we are also going to save the value if we press enter. On key down, if E key is not enter, we can just return. Otherwise, set edit mode false. Let's try it. Perfect. So let's give it the right value, which is column.title. The onChange event has to call a update column function that we have to implement that takes the column ID and e.target.value. Nice. Let's style our input. BG black. Focus border rows 500. Border rounded. Outline none. And a padding. Let's try it now. Perfect. Now we are going to implement the update column function. So let's add it to the properties. Update column that takes ID and title string and returns nothing. Let's extract that from the properties. And let's go back to our Kanban Board.tsx file to implement it. So update column takes update column. And let's implement it after the delete column function. So function update column, which that takes an ID, a title of type string. And what we can do now is const new columns, columns.map, call. If call.id is not the ID that we want, we are returning the column as it is. Otherwise, we are returning a new column that has the new title with the same ID. And then we are going to update our columns array. Otherwise, you will have an error. Update column. Now, another thing that we are going to do is to disable drag and drop functionality while we are in editing mode. So let's go back to our column container. And in the use sortable hook, we can set the disabled property to match our edit mode boolean. So as you can see now, drag and drop is not enabled. And let's edit this, for example, to do. And now everything is working fine. Perfect. Now we are going to style the scroll bar in order to match the style of the application. Let's open the app.css file. Now let's add some columns in order to see the scroll bar. And then let's style it. So let's start with the style, WebKit scroll bar width 4 pixels. Then WebKit scroll bar horizontal 8 pixels. And then WebKit scroll bar thumb. Let's apply a Tailwind class BG rows 900 and let's make it rounded, more rounded. Perfect. Let's go now and add tasks to our Kanban board. In order to do so, let's go back to our Kanban board file and let's go and add a const tasks set tasks use state, and we have to define the state of our tasks to be an empty array. So let's go and define the task type. So let's go back to types.ts file and let's export type task, which contain an ID of type ID, column ID of type ID, content, which is a string. So let's go back to our Kanban board and let's import that task from types. Now let's go to our column and let's add a button that creates a new task in our column. So let's go back to column container and instead of footer, Let's add a button, add the task. Let's add also the plus icon. Let's give it some style, so flex, gap 2, items, let's see, center. Let's give it a border color, a border width. Let's make it rounded. Let's add some padding. And some colors for the over and main state. And when active, background black. Okay, let's try it. And let's add our on-click handler that creates for us a new task. Create task inside this column. Now let's implement the create task function, and we have to start adding it in the props. And it returns nothing. Let's extract it from the props, as always. And sorry, we need a type id here. Perfect. Let's go back to our Kanban board. And let's add create task property that takes create task function. And let's go define this function. So here, function create task, which takes a column ID of type ID, const new task of type task. It's gonna take a random ID, the column ID, and the content will be task and the number, which is the task's length plus 1. Perfect. And now set tasks takes all the previous tasks plus the new one that we have created. Okay, let's add also the create task to the drag overlay of the column. Now you can notice that when we click the button, nothing shows up. But the problem is that we haven't defined a place where we can see our tasks. So let's go and define that. What I want to do is show the tasks inside the column that has the column ID equal to the task ID. So let's go back in our column container and let's create a tasks property that takes all the tasks, we are filtering them, that has task.column ID equal to column, as you can see, call.id. Now we have to add the tasks property to the column container component. So let's go back here. Tasks will be an array of type task. Let's import our task type from types file, and let's extract the tasks from the props. Now what we can do is go and replace content with our tasks. So tasks.map, and let's return for now a div that says task.content, and the key will be task.id. So let's refresh the application. As you can see, now our tasks are showing up. We move on styling our tasks container. So let's go here and let's say flex column. Let's give it a gap. Let's give it some padding. Let's remove the horizontal overflow. And let's put overflow Y auto. Perfect. Now let's go and replace the div element with a task card component. So let's go in our source folder components and let's create a task card.tsx file. I'm gonna use RFC snippet to create my functional component. And then we can use our task card component with the same key, but let's give him the task content as a task property. Let's remove this div. And now let's go back to our task card and add some properties to it. So let's define our props. Task of type task. Let's import the task type. And now we can extract it from the props and use here task content. The result is the same. Let's style our task card now. Let's start by adding a background to it. bg main background, a padding, a fixed height of 100 pixels, mean age of 100 pixels. Let's center the items. Let's make it flex. Text left just in case. Let's make it rounded. Some style on over. So over ring 2, over ring inset, and over ring rows 500. Perfect. And let's change the cursor to be cursor grab. And now let's add a button that deletes the task. So here let's add our button, which will contain our trash icon. And in order to see the trash icon, we need to give it a stroke. Perfect. Then let's make it absolute. So let's make the parent relative. And then let's make it right for top minus. We are centering vertically now, so top minus 1/2. Translate y 1/2. Let's give it a background color. Let's add some padding to it and let's make it rounded. Now the next step that we are going to do is to show this button only when hovering to the task card. Let's add const mouse is over, set mouse is over state to our component, so useState false. Let's import useState from React. And now on our main div, let's add on mouse enter listener and also on mouse leave. So on mouse enter, we are going to set mouse is over to true. And here on mouse leave, we are setting mouse is over to false. And what we can do is wrap this button component and show it only when mouse is over. Let's check it now. Perfect. And let's add a opacity 60 and on over opacity 100. Perfect. And now let's add the on-click event. And on click, we are going to delete the task with task.id. Let's now import this function. So in props, we have delete task that takes an ID of type ID, and you can import it from types that returns nothing. And we are going to extract it from the props. So everything should work. Now we have to implement the function in our Kanban board, because delete task now is not a function. So let's go back to our column container and add the delete task property to the task card. And now we have to also extract the delete task from the column properties. So let's put it here, delete task, ID of type ID, returns void, and let's extract it, delete task. Now let's go back to our Kanban board and let's add our delete task function, which is not existing, so let's go and implement it. So function delete task ID of type ID, and what we will have is const new tasks equal tasks.filter and then task.id is not equal to id. Then we're gonna set the new tasks, set tasks, new tasks. Let's try it. So now, as you can see, I can delete the tasks. Perfect. As you can see, we still have one small error to fix because we need to pass tasks array also to the drag overlay of the column. So what we can do is just copy the tasks property from the column container here and put it inside our drag overlay. And remember to change call.id with active column.id. And there is another error because we're missing also delete task property. Okay, let's check now. Everything is working fine. Okay, now we will add the ability to edit the content of a task. So let's go back to our task card component. Const edit mode, set edit mode, use state false. Let's also add a function const toggle edit mode, which is an arrow function that inverts edit mode value. So prev and then not prev. And also sets set mouse is over false because in edit mode we are not going to show our delete icon. Now when we click our card, we want to enter in edit mode. So on click, toggle edit mode. And what we are going to do is to return a complete different content if we are in edit mode. So if edit mode is true, and for now, let's return a simple fragment with edit mode text inside. Okay, let's test it. I'm clicking, perfect. Let's also fix the cursor. So cursor grab, not grabs, perfect. Okay, I'm refreshing my application. So on edit mode, I'm gonna returning the same div that I have here, but I'm gonna edit it. So let's remove the on-click event. We don't need that. Let's remove the on-mouse enter and the on-mouse leave event. We don't need those. And now, instead of the task content and the button, what we want is a text area. So let's try it now. Okay, let's style this text area. So let's give it 890%. Full width, resize none, border none. Let's make him rounded. Let's remove the background. Let's put the text white. And on focus, let's remove the default outline. Perfect. So let's also give some, then we can set the value of the text area that will be task.content, autofocus. Let's put a placeholder. Then a on blur that toggles edit mode, and also on key down. If the user press enter, we have to close the edit mode. Let's take the event, and if e.key equals enter, then toggle edit mode. And finally, let's implement the on change event. It's going to update our task, takes task.id as a first parameter, and e.target.value as the new content of the task. Now we have to implement this update task function, so let's import it from the props, as always. id of type id, content of type string, and this function returns nothing. Then let's extract it from the props. And now let's go back to our column container file. As you can see, we have an error on the task card because we have to add the update task property. So update task, that takes update task. And let's go on our column container props and add the update task function, which takes ID of type ID, content of type string, and returns void. Let's extract it from the props. And now let's finally implement it on the Kanban board.tsx file. So column container needs a update task property. And let's create the function. So function update task, ID of type ID, content of type string, and now const new tasks equal to tasks.map task, and if task.id is not matching with the ID that we want, we are returning the original task. Otherwise, we are returning a new task with the new content. Let's go set tasks, new tasks. And let's go fix this small error here because we have to add the update task property also to the column container drag overlay. Let's try it now. And the text is updating, but we have one problem here because we can't add the new lines, because if we press enter, we close the edit mode. So let's go back to our task card component. And we have to check that the user is pressing enter and the shift key at the same time. So now, if I try to put a new line inside, hello from the task. As you can see, I can write it. And if I want to close edit mode, I can press shift and enter. But we have a problem. The problem is that our new lines are not showing up. So let's go and fix also that. Let's go back to our original task card, and then let's wrap our task content inside a P element. And let's style the P element. So class name, let's center it. Let's give it a fixed height, 90% of the parent. Full width, overflow Y auto, overflow X auto, white space pre-wrap. Okay, perfect. Let's style the scroll bar inside the task. So I'm adding an extra task class name inside our main div. Then let's go back to our app.css file and .task. Let's select the scroll bar inside the task, WebKit, scroll bar, thumb, apply BG Sky 500, rounded XL. Perfect. Let's see. And this also is good. Let's go back to our task card. And sorry, I've made a mistake previously. Let's change the overflow X auto on overflow X hidden. So let's try to overflow it. Perfect. Okay. Finally, we are going to add drag and drop functionality to our task card. So let's go back to our task card component. And now we have to do the same steps that we have already done for the column container. So let's go back to our column container file. And let's copy the use sortable hook code. So let's go back to our task card and let's paste it from clipboard. Now we are going to import the use sortable hook from Dnd-Kit sortable. Let's replace the column word with task. Also here and also here. Now we are creating a sortable that has the task ID, has type task, and has another property in data called the task that contains all the property of our task, which will be ID, column ID, and content. Now let's go back to column container and let's copy the style variable. So let's go back to our task card and let's paste it. Perfect. Let's import CSS from Dnd-Kit utilities. Now we have to add the attributes, listeners, style, and the reference to our divs. So let's start by adding those to the div that we are returning in edit mode. So ref equal set node ref, style equal style. Let's spread the attributes and let's spread the listeners. Now let's copy those 4 properties and let's add those also to the div that we are returning when we are not in edit mode. Perfect. Now, in order to sort our tasks, we need to wrap those inside a sortable context. So let's go back to our column container file and let's wrap our task card list with a sortable context which can be imported from Dnd-Kit sortable. Now we have to add an items property to the sortable context that contains all the IDs of our tasks. So let's set items equal to tasks IDs and let's go and create this variable. Let's go on our column container and let's say const tasks ID equal use memo. And what we are doing, we are returning tasks.map task.id. And we are going to recalculate this array when tasks changes. So we are using tasks as a dependency here for use memo. Perfect. Okay, let's try it now. Okay, as you can see, I can sort, but I have 2 problems. First, when I release the mouse, the sort is not happening because I'm not persisting the new state on our Kanban board. The second problem that I have is that I want to see a drag overlay while I'm sorting. So let's start by adding a drag overlay to our task card component. So let's go back to task card component. And as you can see, I'm not using the isDragging property that the useSortable hook is returning to us. So let's go and use that. Let's create a new check if isDragging, and let's return for now a div that contains dragging task text. Let's see if it's working. Perfect. We have also to set the reference and the style to our isDragging div. And let's also add a custom style that renders an empty card. So let's copy the card style for now. So let's go back here and let's paste it. Okay, let's remove the text. I want an empty one. Perfect. Let's add an opacity, 50 for example. Perfect. And so we don't need the over style, but what I want to see is a border of color rows. And I'm going to lower the opacity a little more. Let's try it now. Perfect. Okay, so let's close our div because we don't have anything inside. And now we are going to add a drag overlay component for this task. So let's go back to our Kanban board. And what we are going to do is the same that we have already done for the column container component. So let's go back on our onDragStart event. And let's check if the event active is of type task, we can set active task to be the active data current task. And now let's go implement the setActiveTask function. So const activeTask set activeTask equal takes use state of type task or null with the init value of null. Perfect. And now inside our drag overlay component, what we can do is if active task is true, then we are going to render a task card and the task property will be our active task. But I have put it in the wrong place. I think it's here. Perfect. And now we need to add some properties, delete task and update task to our task card. So delete task takes delete task and update task takes update task. Let's try it now. Now we have to fix the other problem that we had, which was our task state is not updating. For example, as you can see, we are releasing the task 2 before the task 1, but the sort is not persisted. And there is also another thing that we have to fix. As you can notice, when I drag the task over another column, my drop preview is not showing up. Instead, when I move it in the same column, I'm showing my drop preview. This happens because each column has a separate sortable context, and each column doesn't know anything about others' columns' content. A good way to handle this is to move the task on the new column when the task is over the column and not on the onDrag event. So I will explain it another time. Instead of moving the task when we release the drag button, we are moving it when we hover another column or another task, because in this case, when we drag task 1 over task 3, we are not hovering a column, but we are hovering a task in another column. So let's see how to do this. So as pointed out earlier, we need to use onDragOver event. So let's go back to our DND context component and let's add onDragOver property that takes onDragOver function. Let's go and implement the onDragOver function. So function onDragOver, I'm taking an event which is a drag over event, and you can import it from Dnd-Kit core. And now I can copy all these lines from the onDrag event because we have the same behavior here. So let's copy it. So let's paste it. And now we have two possible scenarios. The first one is that I'm dropping a task over another task. The second one is I'm dropping a task over a column. So let's handle the first case now. Now I have to check if the active element and the over element are tasks. So const is active a task. So active.data.current with a question mark operator because can be null, dot type equals task. Let's do the same for the over element. So is over a task. Let's replace active word with over. So now we can do if is active a task and is over a task. In this case, I have to swap the two tasks. So I will call the setTasks function, but I'm not finding it because I put the onDragOver function outside our component, sorry. Now I think it's good. Yes. So I'm taking all the tasks and we are going to swap the tasks. So let's find the index of both tasks inside our tasks array. Const active index task.findIndex of t, where t.id equal active id. Let's do the same for the over task. Const over index equal task.findIndex of t, where t.id equal over id. Return array move of tasks active index, and let's swap it with over index. So let's see if it's working, but there is a strange behavior. And okay, this is happening because on drag end, we are not setting our active column and active task to null. So set active column to null and set active task to null. In this way, when the drag ends, we are removing our drag overlay components. Okay, so let's refresh the application and let's try it. So now everything seems to work. but my task can only be sorted inside the column. I still cannot put the task on another column. So let's go back to our onDragOver event. And the first thing that I can do is that when I drag a task over another task that isn't in the same column, I can just update the column ID of my active task. So what I can do is if tasks active index dot column ID is not equal to tasks at over index dot column ID, then what I can do is just to update it. So I can copy this and set it with the over column ID. Okay, let's try it now. And as you can see, now it's working. But if you think about it, we can get rid of this if statement, because what happens is that if the tasks are on the same column, these two column ID variables have the same value, so nothing's changed. Otherwise, if the tasks are not in the same column, I'm just updating the active column ID with the over column ID. So we can just remove that if statement. Perfect. Now we have to implement the scenario where we are dropping a task over a column. The first thing that I'm going to do, that I forgot to do earlier, so if is not active a task, then I'm just returning, because I want to enable the onDragOver code event only when I'm dragging tasks. Then let's go there and let's add const is over a column, over.data.current with the question mark because can be null, dot type equals column. Now if is active a task and is over a column, then we can just update the active task column ID to match the over ID. So we can copy the code from here. Let's paste it here. We don't need the over index anymore, and we can use instead of this over ID. And let's replace over index with active index. And if you are asking yourself why I'm using array move with the same two indexes, then the answer is that with the array move, I'm triggering a re-render of my tasks because I'm creating a new array. So let's try it now. Everything seems to work perfectly. Now the very last thing that we have to do is to fix a bug that I found while reviewing my code, which is when we delete a column, I forgot to delete the tasks that are inside the column. So let's go back to our delete column function. And here, let's add const new tasks equal tasks.filter, and let's take all the tasks where t.column ID is not equal to the deleted ID. So set tasks, new tasks. So I have refreshed the application. Let's try it now. So I'm creating two tasks. I'm going to delete the column. And now if I create the task again, the number resets. So it's perfect. I would like to share with you some concerns and consideration on what we could have done differently in the code. So let's see it. The first improvements that we can do is to create a drag overlay for each component. And what I mean with this is that we can just create another component called, for example, column drag overlay that is not requiring all the properties that our column container is requiring, because the drag overlay is not interactive. So, for example, delete column property, create task, delete task, update column property, etc. are not required. That's one thing. Another thing is that, as you can see, I first declared the properties in almost every component, and then I extracted those inside the function. Another approach is just to extract those directly there, like this. But I haven't used this approach because, in my opinion, this makes the code less readable. This is just a personal opinion. If you made it to the end, I thank you, and I remind you to give a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video. If you have questions of any kind, leave a comment and I will try to help you out. See you in the next video.